as we saw back in October when we last had an eclipse locally, which was an annular eclipse. The rabbis of Talmud and early rabbinic codes really viewed eclipses very negatively. They saw them as divine response to negative behavior on behalf of the people, or they saw them as negative omens. We don't need to necessarily ascribe to eclipses such moral messages. We can instead appreciate them for what they are, which are extraordinary moments in a cosmic ballet between three bodies. Celestial, enormous bodies, the sun, the moon, and the earth. And when you stop and think about it, eclipses like the one that we saw this week are really extraordinary. Because even though the moon sometimes is slightly further away and slightly closer to the earth than the average, on average, the moon is exactly the same size as the sun in the sky. And that's because of an extraordinary thing, that the moon is 400 times smaller than the sun, and the sun is also 400 times further away than the moon. And this cosmic coincidence, you might say, allows the moon to sometimes totally obscure the sun. Sometimes the moon is a little smaller, leading to an annular eclipse, or at least it appears smaller, leading to an annular eclipse, and sometimes it's exactly the same size, leading to a total solar eclipse. And even though in New Mexico it was cloudy and we only got to see a partial eclipse, nonetheless, it still is an awesome spectacle, an extraordinary spectacle. Before I called the fact that the moon is 400 times smaller than the sun and the sun is 400 times further away than the moon, I called it a cosmic coincidence. There are people who turn around and say, that's not coincidence, that's part of a larger design. We can discuss that, we can debate that. What kind of God creates a universe in which that is the only major cosmic coincidence? Or you could say, skeptics might turn around and say, why would God create a universe in which there are so many terrible things, but God creates awesome spectacles like this? It doesn't seem like a very intelligent design. But others turn around and say, for example, Maimonides turned around and say that the world was created from imperfect matter, so imperfect things happen in this world. Nonetheless, we can still see the finger of God in creation. And it's not my place to say which philosophy or theology is correct. I do think it is extraordinary that ours is the only planet in the solar system, indeed the only planet that we know of in the entire universe, where there are total solar eclipses. And that is extraordinary. Whether or not it points to something, someone greater, that's perhaps for others to discuss. But for me, I tend to focus instead on awe, and that moment of awe, the fact that it is awesomeness. And the rabbis actually look at these eclipses in terms of fear, and we can look at them in terms of awe and appreciate that they are the same thing, as we explored in my High Holy Day sermons at the beginning of the year. That fear and awe are very strongly connected. They come through the same word in Hebrew, yirah. Yirat Elohim, which was often translated as fear of God, can be translated as awe of God. The fact that life itself is awesome and terrifying. The fact that we are born, we live, and we die can for some people be terrifying. And for others, or indeed even for the same people, the fact that we are born, we live, and we die is awesome, especially because the second law of thermodynamics says that in a closed system, everything breaks down to entropy. Everything ultimately breaks down to nothingness. So the fact that we exist, the fact that we go against that is extraordinary, awesome. The fact, as Abraham Joshua Heschel says, when he talks of radical amazement, the fact not just that we can be amazed by the universe, but that we can be amazed by the fact that we are amazed, is itself amazing. So I like to use moments like the eclipse, the solar eclipse that we had this week. I like to use them as moments to remind us of how terrifying, fragile, and also how awesome life is. There's something very unifying about our species being the one that looks up to the heavens to see this awesome spectacle. It reminds me of Psalm 121. Esai enai mehe harim, may ayin yavo Isri. I lift up my eyes to the hills, from where does my help come? We, human beings, lift up our eyes. We can lift up our eyes in awe, in appreciation, in wonder of the world around us. And we can use that awe to remind us of how fragile we are, and therefore how special our lives are. So whether it was cloudy, whether you saw a partial eclipse, whether you were able to view totality, we can all at least be unified in the appreciation of life. Even with life's struggles, even with life's difficulties, the fact that we exist, the fact that we can appreciate that we exist, is in and of itself awesome. And that, I believe, is one of the reasons why we gather to pray, as we do, for example, this evening. And we invite you to join us for our family service, so it's an earlier start time to our service. And during that family service, we also have a baby blessing, and those are awesome. Being a parent, for those who are parents, being a parent is terrifying. I never knew fear truly until I was a parent, but I also never knew love and awe and appreciation until I was a parent as well. And so I encourage you to join us to celebrate life, to celebrate the wonder of creation in our Kabbalat Shabbat service, and indeed in our Torah study and rest of services for this weekend. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom, a Shabbat of peace, and a Shabbat of awe and appreciation of life and the world around us. And I wish you Shabbat Shalom.